onto Facebook and YouTube every third Monday of the month at 6 o'clock Second Life time or Pacific time for you folks in real life. We meet mystery authors and others from the publishing world to talk about books and the issues facing them today, from social and technological change. And there's certainly been a lot of those lately. I'd like to thank Droxter Dupre, host of the Second Life Book Club and the Drax Files Radio Hour, both broadcast here from Second Life, for his sponsorship and use of Book Club Island for our production. I'd also like to thank Strawberry Linden and Brett Linden for their help in setting this show up. And finally, my eternal thanks to Becky Hansen and Isabel Charon for all their technical assistance in making this happen. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible. And special thanks to Isabel for getting up at 1 o'clock her time in the UK to run the camera. Allow me now to introduce this evening's guest, Kristopher Zgorski, the 2018 Raven Award winner for Mystery Writers of America. Kristopher is one of the leading mystery thriller reviewers and bloggers on the planet right now. You can find his reviews on bolobooks.com, and I would encourage you to go take a look at them. Kristopher, good evening, and thank you for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Con.
Our pleasure. Kristopher, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your career? What led you to writing reviews for mysteries and thrillers and setting up the Bolo Books blog?
Sure. I have a degree in English, and when I graduated, I was wondering what I was going to do with that degree. Ended up in publishing, working for several academic journal publishers, where I'm currently at Johns Hopkins University Press. But I knew I wanted to do something with the creative side as well. So as I tried to write, I found that whatever I was reading was influencing what I was writing. So I couldn't really do both, but I knew I could never give up reading. So I decided that if I wrote about what I was reading, it would be a way to still hone the writing skills, but not give up the reading. So I came up with the idea to do a book blog, which were blossoming in the early 2010s and onward. So I came up with the idea. I started to attend BoucherCon and Malice Domestic and other crime fiction conventions around that time, with the plan that eventually I would launch a blog. And I met people and made contacts and all that. And then in 2012, I launched Bolo Books in October. So I'm coming up on 8 years here next weeks. And it pretty much took off very quickly because of the groundwork I had laid in those years attending the conferences beforehand. So it sort of seemed like an overnight success, but it was a lot of work leading up to that. I'd always read mystery novels, so it just made sense that those would be the books.
I have to admit, I first became aware of who you are when I started connecting with many mystery and thriller writers. I was following them on Facebook and Twitter, and I noticed that whenever they were going to conferences, you were always in the pictures. And that led me to figure out who you were. At first I thought you were a writer, and then I realized you were doing Bolo Books. So yeah, you're certainly getting out there.
I do get around at those conferences. I love to give people hugs when I see them. So people are always hunting me down and getting pictures and hugs and all kinds of stuff. So those are like family reunions for me. So it's been a rough time this year not being able to go to any of them.
I can imagine. Now, let me ask you what might be a trick question. Forgive me if it is. Why did you decide what led to your interest in mystery thrillers as opposed to, let's say, sci-fi, fantasy, historical novels? Was it just luck of the draw, or was there something about them that attracted you?
Well, I read everything. I mean, I read much more than just mysteries, but mysteries has always been my first and strongest love. So from the moment I read Encyclopedia Brown when I was a child, I knew that mysteries, something about the solving of puzzles was something that always intrigued me. And then I discovered Mary Higgins Clark and other writers at the time, and the sense of justice is important to me. I love to read knowing that there's going to be generally some kind of a resolution, whether it's a happy one or not is not always the case. But I like knowing that that's the direction we're going in, that we're striving to make the world a better place through justice. So mysteries have always been, and then I love the movies and television shows too. So it's just always been everything mystery for me. I love true crime as well. So it just made sense that if I was going to do it, I couldn't do a general book blog. I mean, there are general book blogs out there, but they're much harder to promote and do that kind of legwork on. So I decided I would just focus on mystery since I was going to those conventions.
I love your comments about a sense of justice and finding justice. There's so much of that missing in the world today. Thank you. What I'd like to talk to you about next is your blog seems to have filled a gap out there in the media world. I think many of people in the audience are familiar with the death of newspapers, magazines. The ones that are left standing are a lot thinner than they were when I was growing up. Very few newspapers and journals have full-time book reviewers anymore, let alone one dedicated to the to mysteries. I think the New York Times critic might be one of the last ones in the country. I may be wrong there. How has this contraction of the normal review space affected reviews, and it has led to the popularity of yourself? Also, I'd like to mention Joanne Love, who will be joining us in December, another well-known mystery reviewer. How has this affected your work or helped your work?
It's true that when I was launching the blog, I mean, the reason blogs have, book blogs in particular, have risen to their prominence is because of those shrinking column inches in newspapers. I mean, there are blogs for movies, there are blogs for other entertainment, theater, all kinds of things, because when they decided newspapers needed to cut space, those entertainments were the first things that were cut. And when a cut like that happens, it means that generally speaking, only the top tier authors are going to get space in there. So it also meant that we were cutting a lot of the heard voices. So book blogs have risen up to fill that space, which is important because, as we've seen now, the society wants diverse voices. So while there are some newspapers that do better jobs than others, generally speaking, you're going to see bestsellers that are reviewed in there and interviews with the best-selling authors because they are trying to sell their newspaper, and that's what's going to sell their newspaper. But there's value in learning about the lesser heard voices that people don't know are out there. So book blogs have filled that spot. So it's sort of a win-win both, because I mean, newspapers are still great and the New York Times will always be the epitome of reviews, probably. I personally can't read them because I think they give away too much of the book, so I only read their reviews after I've read the book, just because I hate spoilers. My goal with my reviews has always been to encourage people to read the books, not to give a book report about the book. So book blogging is it's still, we still have an uphill road to go. I mean, we're still there are good blogs and there are bad blogs, just like there are good newspaper reviewers and bad newspaper reviewers. So sometimes book blogging gets lumped into some non-professional type of thing because there are people who are just doing it as a hobby. I mean, we're all doing it as a hobby, but some people really take it as a hobby and they don't really invest a whole lot of time in it. So it gives a bad reputation for those bloggers out there that, like myself, that are doing a really professional job filling space that newspapers can't fill without getting any kind of compensation for it.
And for the members of the audience out there who may not be familiar with Bolo Books, I want to say that the professional standards that Kristopher has are very high. Now he might say that he's doing this on the side as a hobby, but the quality of his reviews and his writing is very good. And I would encourage you that if you're looking to look at reviews for a broader base than just the mere bestsellers, which unfortunately are what we seem to get in the mainstream press today, check out Bolo Books.
And it's worth noting, Con, that my reviews are also picked up by Deadly Pleasures Mystery Magazine, which is a print publication, or was a print publication until just recently and has now gone online only, but still a publication, that they feel that their readership is not a readership that's online reading blogs. tends to be an older demographic. So they pick up my reviews from the blog, or actually I choose them. I curate the ones that I think would be of interest to that community. And they rerun them in that magazine. So the reviews are there as well. And then I also have a column in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine that's called Blog Bites that was run for years by a famous Kreider, who unfortunately passed away. And when he passed, they wanted to continue that, and they were kind and generous enough to reach out to me and say that they thought I had enough touch with the digital world to pick up that blog. So that blog actually talks about websites and places online where you can find mystery related content, whether they be author collective blogs where a bunch of authors come together and discuss things, or other review sites or things like
that. Okay. That's very good. Moving up the food chain, Kristopher, how has this grassroots approach to book reviews affected the publishing industry, if it has at all?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the publishing, interestingly enough, and I think I told you this offline when we were talking before, that the book blogging community in the UK is much more robust than it is here in the States. And I'm not sure, I've been trying to study this for a while to figure out why this is. Seems like the publishers in the UK have latched on to these book bloggers as their almost their main outlet for promotion, as opposed to newspapers. And I don't know enough about the UK and their system of newspapers and stuff, so I think that that could be part of it. I'm sure the Guardian is publishing great reviews like the New York Times is, but it seems like they might not have as many newspapers. Obviously, they don't have state newspapers and stuff, so I think that that's part of the reason. But they definitely have latched on to their bloggers in a much more, I mean, those bloggers get invited to launch parties and everything. Which also is probably because all of that's based in New York here. So unless you're a New York-based blogger, you're probably not going to get invited to those parties anyway. But I know some who are in New York and they're not invited to publishing houses for very often. So I'm not sure. But it's certainly moving up in the world. I mean, there are certainly publishers know who I am and who other bloggers are now more than they did when I launched now. Whether that's because we've gotten out there and made ourselves heard, I can't really say for sure, but I know that the profile of book blogs in general and Bolo Books specifically has risen quite a bit over the last 8 years.
One of my concerns about the publishing industry these days is the consolidation of power and capital into fewer and fewer companies. And while many of the imprints are still out there, they're really just being rolled up into the big 4 or 5 for the most part. What kind of an effect is this having on the mystery thriller genre in your estimation?
Discoverability is a big issue now, especially for bloggers. I mean, the general reader is going to go to the bookstore and pick up books. So I don't think a whole lot has changed for the general reader. But for blogs such as mine and even newspaper reviews, while those condensings have happened and imprints have been sold into other bigger entities, they are not adding any staff. So now the staff is working twice as hard or 3 times as hard to try to get out words about books. So again, this causes some problem where the lesser known and the newer voices are not getting an audience with even people who want to promote them, because they're only sending out emails about the top 10 books they have for this month instead of the top 40 books that are on their list. So discoverability is a big issue, and that's why, I mean, I try to focus the blog on the non-bestsellers. I mean, I read Michael Connelly. I love Michael Connelly. Every book he writes is amazing. I don't really review him on the blog because he doesn't really need that promotion. I mean, he's going to get that newspaper coverage, and his book is going to sell anyway. So I'd rather give that time and space on my blog to a new voice, or a voice from a writer of color or some other diversity that needs to be heard, in hopes that people will discover them.
How have all these changes and trends affected you and other independent reviewers and bloggers? Does this bode well for your future going ahead, or do you see any bumps on the road?
I think it's only going to get better. I mean, I do think, I mean, I tell authors whenever I talk to them, and like I said, I go to all these conventions, so I'm on panels talking to authors. I tell them never to rely on their publisher to be making sure that bloggers are getting their books. Um, Reach out to us and ask us if we've gotten your book, especially if you want us to have it in particular, because we can't find every book, and publishers are not sending us every book. So they need to really, as part of their career now, that marketing part of it, unless they hire an outside publicist, and even then I say, make sure your publicist is doing what they're supposed to be doing, because I've had many cases where they were supposed to send me a book, I didn't get it, I didn't review it, and then the author asks me why I didn't review it or what I didn't like about it. Ignored it, and I'm like, I never got it. So they need to step up and make sure that the people who they want to have the book actually get it in their hands.
Very good, very good. Let's move on to a topic I know that's very important to you. It's important to me and many members of our audience. Diversity in writing and publishing these days. How
Yes.
has what we've talked about with publishing companies, newspapers, how is this affecting diversity? And so in some of my earlier panel discussions and also seeing it on some of Draxter Dupre's, I hear stories about, I don't know, for want of a better term, quotas that are placed on writers of color, the LGBTQ community. Say, okay, we've met the number of books that we're going to have for this year, this quarter, so I'll come back next time. Uh, what do you see going on out there in the publishing world, and how can
Well, I don't
reviewers help
know
it?
that much about the actual publishing side of it for sure to know that they're putting quotas on there. I do know that I read Self Awareness, the newsletter, every day, and I've seen more and more people of color getting promoted into positions of higher power at publishing houses. So I think we're seeing that change as we're seeing the change in society in general. My problem with the whole diversity issue is that for me, diversity is just a part of my life. So I've never set out to do a diverse blog. It was never something I actually talked about when I started. I just did diverse things. I mean, the first book I ever reviewed on Bolo Books was Attica Locke's The Cutting Season. Not for any other reason other than the fact that it's a wonderful book. I loved it, not thinking, oh, well, this will be cutting edge because it's so diverse. But people were like, oh, it's so nice to see that you're covering things that other people aren't covering. So it took me a while to realize that just my natural existence is so diverse that that comes through on the blog intention. I mean, without that being the goal. But now that we're seeing a societal shift where that's become the thing, I certainly have started to promote that more and to say that that's something we need to do. But still, to me, it still feels like it's a little bit. I just don't want it to be a trend that's going to come and go. I hope that it's a change we're seeing that's going to be a change for a while. One of the things I hate most is when I hear people say that I like so and so despite them being different or despite their differences. I like people because of their differences. I want to hear voices that I don't know so that I can learn and grow from that. And I think that that's what people are missing when they turn away from books that are by people who are not like them. I mean, we in the music world, you have like songs with harmony, which is different voices coming together that create a new, more beautiful sound. And that's exactly what happens if you read books that are outside of your comfort zone. You learn those voices and you empathize with them, and your life is better because of it.
I like what you said about stepping outside of our comfort zone and reading books from a broader stratum than we might normally otherwise. It's without going into all the gory details. I think we can say that what's happening in our country today, there's a lot of turmoil out there, and people are beginning to sit up, take notice, and think that maybe we're not quite as open, diverse, and equal as we think we are. Efforts like yours, I try on this show to bring in a broader, more diverse community, and I hope we succeed doing it. But what else can other people do on the outside when it comes to their reading habits, their public libraries, when we reopen the public libraries, to assist in this whole question of diversity?
Well, the biggest thing you can do is read books that are diverse. Read books that pick up a book that's by somebody of color that you wouldn't think that you might like, and read it and see that you like it. And then when that happens, because I know it will, especially if you're looking at the blogs and the reviews and you're seeing what the top books are in those kind of areas, then you can be confident that you're going to get a high quality story. So once you see that, then share it with your friends and family. I mean, it's all about trying to spread the awareness of them, and to get people to see that these books can teach us something too. I mean, they will entertain us, they will show us ways of life we don't know, and enrich our lives in the process. So I just don't know why people are opposed to that. I mean, we saw it way back when women weren't getting read either. I mean, it's no different. We've been through this process before. So go out and read something out of your comfort zone. Pick up something that you wouldn't have picked up last week, or and see what you think about it.
Good, good. What trends do you see coming for writers and reviewers in the future, given all the turmoil we have today around us, both from a technology point of view, social point of view, changes in reading habits?
I'm hearing from, just in general conversations, I mean, I do have a lot of author friends and we just sit around talking about publishing all the time. I'm hearing that a lot of them are being told that we're moving towards a time when standalones are preferred over a series. I don't really know if that's just anecdotal evidence, or whether that's actually coming from publishers. I have no way of knowing that, but I trust that they're telling me what they're hearing. And I can see where that would make sense. Especially a long-running series. I mean, there long-running series that are now running will be fine, but I think to try to have a long-running series moving forward, just to start a series now and say you're going to write Sue Grafton write 27 books in it, I think that's a goal that's probably too ambitious with the way society is and the way people read. They just tend not to be that focused on it. I mean, the binging of TV shows seems to take precedence over reading, unfortunately. Hopefully, blogs and reviews are changing that and encouraging people to pick up books. But I can see where a standalone is easier to market. You don't have to try to convince a person that they need to read 4 other books. They just need to read one. So I can see publishers saying that, but like I said, I'm not sure. It'll also be interesting to see what happens moving forward with the pandemic, whether or not we're going to see probably 2 streams of literature coming out, stuff that addresses the COVID pandemic and books that don't. I know authors who are doing both. We've already seen Peter May came out with Lockdown, which dealt with a pandemic very similar to COVID that he wrote years ago and was turned down by the publishing house, saying it was unrealistic. And then as soon as the COVID-19 hit, they were like, oh yeah, now we're going to publish this because now it's actually happening. And there are other books. There have been a few anthologies of stories that are related to COVID. So I think we'll see 2. It's going to be hard for, again, with the series, if your series is set in the current day, to not discuss it, because it's going to look like something that you're ignoring. So I'm going to be interested to see how that happens. And then the final thing I think we're going to see is also from society, is that with the Black Lives Matter movement and the policing issue, I think we're probably going to see maybe less police procedurals, or if not less, then at least ones that address the police in a more realistic way. I think we've seen a reckoning where we're looking at our police procedurals and saying that they're not exactly, with exceptions, of course, as always, but they're not always realistic in their depictions. The cops tend to be the good guys in these books more often than not in a police procedural. And we're going to need to see some more reflection of the actual policing situation so that we can then address that in the society.
Yes, I agree with you. I think the advent of everybody having a mobile phone where they can take instant video of high quality and spread it out on the internet has shown us that there are some of our law enforcement people have problems, and those problems unfortunately affect minority communities and, of course, many people their lives. And you try to reconcile that with the hero in many of these books. You know, these days, at least to me, it comes across as sounding a little hollow or unrealistic unless you really reflect and address those issues. I found your comment about series to be very interesting. Uh, you know, since I've been working with writers, you know, everybody's been telling me that, you know, publishers love series. But one of the things I've noticed is with the rise of self-publishing, you're getting a lot of Me Too's. Uh, you know, I'm sure somebody out there is going to try to, you know, do a take on Sue Grafton and try to restart the alphabet, maybe in lowercase. I don't know. Uh,
Let's hope not.
yeah, I
Those
know.
books are sacred.
They are. They are. She promised to come back and haunt her children if they ever let anybody continue the series. Uh, what What do you think about self-published mysteries and thrillers? Do you cover them in your reviews? Are they starting to gain more respect? Are they going to be a phenomenon in the future?
They're definitely gaining more respect. I generally, my disclaimer on the blog says that I don't cover them, but this isn't really actually true. I will cover some independent published books, but usually if I've met you at a conference and you've come up to me and we've talked about it. The problem with that, again, it's a discoverability issue. I know there's good independently published books out there. I've read them, they're there. I know they are. I talk to other people who know they're there. But finding them takes a lot of time, and I only have, as it is, so much time in the day to read, and I really need to get reviews up. So I can't really spend time trying to discover the next great thing in the independent published world. Unfortunately, there are blogs that focus only on independent, and that's what we need. We need all of those voices to come together. So there are blogs that focus only on independently published books, and those are valuable because they have the time or the ability or the desire to go through and find those gems in there. I listen to buzz a lot, so I mean, an independent book can gain a lot of buzz and get its attention. So I listen to those kind of things, and something may jump onto my radar that way. Or, like I said, if I meet you at a conference and we sat down and had a drink, and you told me a little about your book, and I can see that you're can put sentences together, then I assume that maybe the book is going to be okay and I'll give it a try. But to just pick up a random thing, I just don't have time. I mean, I get so many books in the mail daily, and it just, I see them, and I mean, I try to tell all the independent publishers, I mean, independent people to spend a lot more money on your covers. I mean, some of those covers are just so bad that it just, there's no way it's going to compete with professionally produced books out there. So you need to be realistic about what's going to happen with your book and spend the money to get a professional designer to do a cover so that you can compete with.
I may be asking a trade secret here from you. How many books do you read in any given week or month?
I read about, well, let's go back to my reading, is that I don't finish everything now at this point in my career. If I know I'm not going to review a book, I'm unlikely to finish it. Because I don't do negative reviews, just because that's not my thing. I always want to try to promote reading, so I can promote reading better by doing positive reviews. So if I'm not going to enjoy a book enough to review it, I usually stop. And the way I do this is I generally read 50 pages. And at that point I stop and I say, is this book good enough for review? And if the answer is no, it probably means it's really poorly written and it just goes right to the wayside. If it's like, okay, well, it's interesting to me and I'm going to go, then I'll go another 50 pages. So that takes me to page 100, and I do another examination at that point. And at that point, if I say, yes, I think this is going to be something I might review, I still don't know, but I think I might review it, then it's almost a guarantee that I'll finish it if I got to a page 100, generally speaking. So I finish probably about 3 books a week, but there's probably 2 or 3 more books in there that got thrown away at the wayside somewhere during the process, at the 50-page mark or at the 70-page mark or somewhere along there. But I probably finish about 3 books a week.
Okay, I'm impressed. That's a lot. My
I
personal
read
best.
all the time. I mean, I don't read. I'm not a. People say you must be a really fast reader. I'm not a particularly fast reader, but I read all the time. I read, especially now that I don't have a commute. I mean, I was listening to audiobooks on my commute to also increase the reading speed. But I read, I'm one of those people that can read, like if there's 10 minutes before the dinner boils and I can sit down, I can read for 10 minutes and still enjoy that and get content out of it. Some people need like a long stretch of time where they have to devote to reading. I'm not one of those people. I can read small snips here and there. So I read a lot. I read every day at lunch. I read in the evenings, but I mean, I have a husband and we watch television. So I still have a life too. It's not like I'm reading all the time. It's tough, but if it's a priority for you, you will find it. All these people that tell me that they don't have time to read, I say, you don't have time to read because it's not a priority for you. You make something else a priority in place of that, which is okay, but it's sort of an excuse to say, I don't have time to read. You have time to do all those other things, so you could have made time to read if you really wanted to. Generally speaking, of course, there are exceptions to every rule. There are people who are working 4 and 5 jobs just to make they really can't read.
Yeah.
But the average person who says I can't read just means I don't want to make the time in the day.
I'm in awe. My personal best in my lifetime was 1 year. I read just over 52 books 1 year, which was like 1 book a week, which for me was pretty good. So I'm
Yeah, when I
impressed.
started the blog, that was what my goal was to read 1 book a week, and I did that for the first year or 2 of the blog, and it's increased. Occasionally on the blog, you can go back and look. I post stats about my reading history. I don't know if I did it in 2019 or not, but it's an interesting thing to look at because it breaks it down by whether I read it in paper or whether I read an e-copy and those kind of things. It's interesting stats that are kind of geeky to look at occasionally.
Sounds fun. Um, what kind of challenges do you see for writers in the future? Last year, I did a blog post for Mystery Writers of America, the New York chapter, talking about income levels for writers. And there'd been a study that the average income for writers in this country, across all genres, not just mysteries or thrillers, that what used to be about $20,000 a year U.S. is now down to about $10,000. Blame
Yeah.
was put on Amazon, self-publishing, consolidation of power in the publishing world. What do you think this bodes for writers in the futures going forward? If it's harder and harder to make a living, unless you're one of the lucky few who becomes James Patterson or Stephen King.
Yeah, it's not going to get any easier. I mean, unfortunately, I can probably count on 2 hands the number of writers I know that it's their sole career. And of course, part of that is once they get so big, then they don't go to conferences and you don't get to hang out with them and talk to them. So the people I'm talking to are writers who are writing and have day jobs or are writing so much that they can make a living by writing several books a year. So there's that. It's if you're going into writing as a career to make a fortune, you're probably barking up the wrong. I think most people know that. I mean, I think there's some unrealistic expectations that maybe back in the days we had that oh yeah, one day I'm going to be so famous I'm going to sit in bookstores and sign books all day and but that's I don't think kids have those dreams anymore. I think they realize that if they're going to become a writer, it has to be something that's in their heart and that they're doing it more than just for a paycheck. That said, I think it's one of many careers out there that is undervalued. I mean, let's look at our teachers. They're not getting paid enough either. So I can't really complain too much about the authors who aren't making a ton of money because they chose a career that you knew going in was going to be a tough road. So you have just as reviewing, just as this thing has to be something that you're doing because it's in your heart and you love it. I mean, I make no money from any of my blog posts or anything. In fact, I pay money to run the site and all those kind of things. So if I didn't love it and it wasn't something that I devoted to, there would be no reason for me to do it because I'm not making anything. So I think writing is a very similar career. I mean, it's nice when you see somebody make it big and their book gets turned into a television show or it becomes a New York Times bestseller. I mean, it was really nice to watch Louise Penny rise from obscurity up to the bestseller list. Now she's a guaranteed New York Times bestseller every time one of the books come out. But I saw her on the ground working those conventions, making those fans, and getting herself there. It didn't happen without a lot of effort and some damn good books. But it's not an easy career.
No, fair enough. Yeah, for sure that it's not. Now, so far this evening, Christopher, we talked a lot about the books that you review, the process. Can you maybe share with us some of your favorite or newest books that you've come across that you'd like to give a shout out to, and maybe we could talk about?
Oh, sure. I can always talk about books.
We've got plenty of time.
Yeah, I've already gone on the record as saying that my favorite book of the year to date is Rachel Hall's And Now She's Gone. I've said this in several interviews and in several blog posts and locations, and that's not going to change. And in fact, tomorrow evening, I'm interviewing Rachel Hall and Kelly Garrett for the Murder by the Book indie bookstore in Texas. So the word has gotten out that I love that book. It's an interesting PI novel that blends itself with a domestic suspense storyline. So it's one of those that's blurring the lines and showing that you can do a lot more. It's also a diverse book. Rachel Hall is African American, and she is writing books that it has nothing to do with the Black life. They did just happen to be Black characters, which I love. I mean, they're just living their lives, telling me authentically what life is like for them, and then crazy shit happens in their life like it does in every mystery novel. So I just love that book, and I'm looking forward to talking with her about it and seeing where where this idea came from.
That's a good her on the show.
Oh yeah, she's. I think it'll be a big book. I mean, like I said, I'm calling it my book of the year. I think it will probably be on many best lists. So we'll see. But I can't imagine a book coming along in the last. I mean, I read in ahead, so I'm already reading December books. So I can't really see a book coming that's going to knock it from my top spot. I like to not say that because you just never know. But I just can't see it being knocked from that spot. Two debuts I loved this year. John Fram's The Bright Lions is a book that straddles, again, a genre-straddling book, this one between mystery and horror almost. It's about a man named Joe Whitley who left his Texas town, which was a big football town, when he was outed as a late teenager, and vowed never to return, but he gets a call from his brother that concerns him, and he returns to town only to see his brother for a moment before a football game, and then by the time the game is over, his brother disappeared. It starts out like a very traditional mystery, and then supernatural elements get introduced, but introduced in a way that you're never really sure that they're supernatural. You're never really, I mean, they're all explainable away in more realistic ways if you don't like supernatural. But if you believe in the supernatural, there are some of those, and it gets even more as you go. It's a pretty gritty. The main character, like I said, was outed, so he's a gay man, and he brings that back with him, and that stigma that the town has against him, making it very difficult for him to discover what happened to his brother. The other debut I loved was Winter Counts by David Heska Wombley Whedon. Quite the name. He's a Native American writer, and it's telling about an Indian reservation, and the infiltration of drugs that we've seen happening in our suburbs is also obviously happening on reservations. And it's a really gritty noir that I just think it's hard to imagine it's a first novel when you're reading it. It's so well constructed and so well written. So have high hopes for that to be on a lot of best of lists as well. Currently, I'm reading a book that's only out in the UK, Ben McPherson's second book. Ben McPherson's first book, A Line of Blood, is one of my favorite domestic suspense novels ever. It's obviously Ben is a man, and so it's a domestic suspense novel that comes from the perspective of the husband in the marriage, which we don't often see. Domestic suspense is heavily female read and written, so we often see the woman's side of things, but you don't normally see. So that book dealt with a father and a son who were playing ball out in the front yard, a young son, and the ball rolls into the neighbor's house. And when they go in to get the ball, they discover the neighbor in the bathtub, having committed what looks like suicide. And then the book devolves from there to a whole study of marriage, family, and parenthood. And it's just an amazing book. So I was very excited, and that was years ago. I think that book came out, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago. So I've been waiting for Ben's second book, and it just was released in the UK 2 weeks ago. It's called The Island. So I picked that up right away from ordering it from the UK, and then I actually got it. Will be out in the US in February under the name Love and Other Lies. So it's The Island in the UK and Love and Other Lies here in the US. So that's kind of interesting. But it's a story that's sort of based off of or inspired by the Oslo shooting that happened a while ago, where a gunman went in and shot up a bunch of children at a camp. And the book takes that, but again, it's a domestic suspense, again, from the father's perspective. But it has that thriller aspect at the beginning. The first chapter alone of just the shooting scene could be a movie unto itself. So it's a really great book. I also recently finished. Should I keep going, Con? I can talk about ever.
Please, we got time. We got time, and our readers love hearing about new authors, new books, and this is an opportunity for people to hear about authors they might not hear about otherwise. So please continue.
Okay. Another book I loved is by a debut author called Alex Pavesi. I'm not sure, Pavesi. It's called The Eighth Detective. Again, it's one of those books that has a different name in the UK. In the UK, it's called Eight Detectives, and here it's called The Eighth Detective. And it's sort of set in the golden age of mysteries, but it feels very modern. It's a weird thing, but it's about an editor in New York who discovers a manuscript that was written by a famous mathematician scholar who studied the crime genre and came up with this mathematical equation that will explain all permutations of the crime novel. And then proceeded to write a short story that shows each of those permutations. So the book is half short story collection and half novel. So you get the short stories, 7 of them, and then in between each short story are a discussion between this editor and the author who she has found, who's been secluded on an island away from society for years. Asking him about about his theories and how they work their way into the stories. But as she's reading the stories, which the reader has just read as well, in each story there are these anomalies that are not explainable. They're look like errors. You think when you're reading the first story, at least when you hit it, you're like, I think they made an editing error in the book. But she brings it up and she asks him why they're there, and he can't remember why they're there. So she then begins to try to figure out what's going on with his short stories. So if you're a fan of short stories, it's a great book just for the stories. I can see myself going back and reading those short stories just as standalones again in the future. But it's also this interesting blend of literature and mathematics that I've never seen before, and I thought I wasn't going to understand it because I hate math, but it all made sense to me, and I was very impressed with it.
Clever.
And then the last one I have on my list is the new Kim Powers. Kim Powers is one of the writers for 2020, the television show. He's written a few good novels, but his new one I just absolutely fell in love with. It's called Rules for Being Dead. It's a coming of age story set in the 60s. Again, it's in Texas. I've read a lot of books set in Texas. What's up with that? But it's about a young boy whose mother has died, and he wants to know what happened, but none of his family will tell him. So he sort of sets out to do an independent investigation. He's like 10, of what happened to her. But at the same time, his mother's spirit is on the other side, narrating some chapters, also trying to figure out what happened to her. So it has a sort of Lovely Bones type feel to it. I mean, she's obviously in the spirit world, but she also doesn't know what happened. So those chapters are there. When I wrote my review, I compared it to the film Cinema Paradiso blended with Edmund White's LGBTQ classic, A Boy's Own Story. And it's because there's a lot of movie references that this boy loves, like old time movies. So there's a whole lot of movie references in it. So if you're a movie fan, there's a lot you can get out of it too. But it's a lovely the little book that could. I said when it came out, I wrote to Kim and I said that if there's any small book that I want people to get into their hands, that would be the book I.
Wow, that's a great list. That's a great list. Hopefully, we can try to get some of those authors on the show next year. As we're starting to go towards the end, I want to leave some time for questions from the audience. One topic that you mentioned a couple of times during our discussion tonight, Kristopher, were books which cross genres. Is there a point in your mind where a book goes too far one way or the other? I know sometimes we'll see mysteries combined with paranormal, fantasy, sci-fi. Urban fantasy itself many times has a gumshoe out there who goes around solving murders somewhere between reality and the spirit world. For you as a reviewer, as a fan of mysteries and thrillers, is there a tipping point where you say, no, this is more something else, it's not a mystery thriller, or are you open to all types?
I'm open to all types. I mean, I think anything can work with the right author and the right combination of elements. Anything can work. I've often thought that ideas I've seen described as a book, I was like, that is never going to work. And then you sit down and you read it and you're like, okay, this really works. So there's nothing I wouldn't say couldn't work. I do think for me, if I'm going to review it on the blog, the mystery element has to be the focus. It has to be the main thing. So anything else needs to help support the mystery. That doesn't mean I won't read it and love it and just not review it on the blog. But for the blog itself, I really am focused on the crime fiction, that truly where the crime is the main focus. So there's not any, but it's really interesting to see the blends that people have been able to come up with and how successful they are. I mean, there was Rob Hart's book last year, The Warehouse, which was very dystopian and a very much condemnation of Amazon as a whole, in book form with a nice mystery to keep you going, but a lot of sci-fi elements. I did review that one on the blog. Actually, now that I say, I only do things that are focused on the mystery. The mystery was secondary to that. I did cover it. But Rob has a following in the generally because of his other series. So I covered it for that reason. But that was a book that I just had no idea what it was going to be. I'm like, how can this book be about people who work at an Amazon type warehouse? But it was gripping right from the get-go, and was sold to Ron Howard for film rights. So obviously he did something right. So like I said, anything can happen.
So we're starting to come to the end of our discussion together. Before I hand it off for questions from the audience, any last thoughts or comments you'd like to make at this point?
Not really. I mean, I just want to encourage people to read. I mean, I just think that if everybody read one book a year, their lives would be different than they are now. I mean, everybody can find time in their day to read one book. If I'm reading 3 books a week, everybody can find time to read one book a year. So pick up a book instead of watching TV and see what's happening out there in the literary world. Maybe you'll become a huge reader. I did. Or maybe you won't, but at least you will have experienced that and you can talk about that at your next cocktail party, whenever we get back to going to cocktail parties.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Sadly, I know too many people in my own life who the last time they read a book was in college, and that's more years than I care to admit to. But yeah, certainly trying to read at least one book a year, and I'd like to challenge people to maybe read one book of fiction, one work of nonfiction, have a little balance in your life. But okay, well, Christopher, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed having you here with us. And Ellis, to see if the audience has any questions for us. It's a little light here tonight, so we may not get too many. So you folks who are out there in the audience would either like to shout out, or if you put them into the nearby chat, and Kristopher will answer them for you. And remember, no spoilers. Happens. Yeah, no spoilers.
No spoilers.
Yeah, let me just check nearby chat, see if anybody's got anything for us. Okay. Not all at once, folks. Okay. Yeah, people are commenting that they like the books that you pointed out and you listed. We'll try to prepare a list of those books and put them out there on our Facebook page so people can see the titles and the authors and maybe go look for them themselves.
Yeah, when I post about this, I'll also tag them so that they know that we talked about them, and people can see them then there too.
Okay.
Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Bolo Books.
Yep, and I would recommend following Kristopher on Twitter, Facebook. Check out his blog. He's got very good reviews. And again, I would like to stress no spoilers, but certainly there's enough there to make you really get an appetite for the book and whether or not you want to read it. Okay, Kristopher, looks like we're not going to get any questions from the audience tonight. Unfortunately, we're not connected directly with our friends over on Facebook and YouTube. So
okay.
They can see us, but we're not getting any feeds in from there. So I would like to thank you for your taking the time to come see us tonight and the time it took to prepare for this.
Well, I appreciate it. I really think this is a great thing you're doing. I mean, this all the outlets we can get that give exposure to books are important. So I'm happy that you guys are out here. I'm happy that you asked me to take part, and I'll certainly be watching the future episodes.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I certainly want to give a thanks to Draxa Dupre, who is a bibliophile. I think he may actually challenge you for the numbers of books read in a year. When the whole pandemic started, he wanted to do something for writers. Sci-fi fantasy is an area that he particularly enjoys, if not loves, and he started. And when I approached him about doing something for mystery thrillers, he was very supportive, and he helped us get started, as well as the folks over at Linden Lab, who I'm grateful for their time and effort in promoting the show. So again, unless anybody out there has any last minute questions, I'm going to say thank you to everyone. Kristopher, thank you for being here with us. I want everybody to know that our next show coming up would be October 17th. We have a special guest for that show, Lee Perry, who actually writes cross-genre. She writes mysteries and paranormal. So she'll be here with us.
And they're great books.
And they are. And matter of fact, we're going to have her guest skeleton Sid with us right now. So what I'd just like to say in closing here is that if you'd like, please contact me at conpsweeney@simeti.com if you have suggestions for panelists, ideas, or shows, or you wish to participate yourself. One thing I'm learning is that this show isn't easy. So if you'd like to volunteer to help on our stage crew, let me know as well. We'll be back on October 17th, again, the third Monday, 6 o'clock, Second Life time or Pacific Standard Time. Thank you again for joining us. Kristopher, thank you. Good night to all out there, and stay safe. Happy Halloween.
Thanks, Con. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you.